I stepped onto the sprawling lawn of my grandpa's house in upstate New York, the air thick with the scent of grilled burgers and summer grass. It was his 90th birthday party, a milestone I'd flown 3,000 miles from London to celebrate. The scene felt like a classic American family gathering, paper lanterns swaying in the breeze, a Bluetooth speaker humming soft jazz, and kids darting around with paper plates. My mom was in her element, hugging strangers and dabbing her eyes with a napkin, while Dad grumbled about the humidity by the grill. My sister Natalie, as usual, avoided me, her husband chuckling at some private joke. I hadn't been here in 5 years. And the house, modest but proud, built from Grandpa's hard-earned success, felt foreign now. They all lived here, my parents, Natalie, her husband, like they'd claimed it while I was gone. Then Grandpa rolled out in a wheelchair, his sweater vest crisp, his face oddly smooth for 90. I waved, but his eyes didn't meet mine, just stared, distant, like he was somewhere else. I brushed it off as age. But then Roger, my husband, leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "Get your bag. We're leaving. Act like nothing's wrong." My stomach dropped. Something was off, and I couldn't unsee it. Roger's voice cut through the hum of the party like a knife, low and steady, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Get your bag. We're leaving. Act like nothing's wrong." I stood there, a plastic flute of cheap champagne still in my hand, staring at him as if he'd just suggested we rob a bank. The backyard was alive with the clink of glasses and the laughter of strangers, but his words made the world tilt. I laughed, a nervous reflex, and whispered, "You're kidding, right?" His eyes, usually warm and teasing, were locked on mine, unblinking, like he was staring through me to some truth I couldn't yet see. "Get your bag," he repeated, his tone so calm it scared me. "Smile. Walk inside. Pack now." My heart started pounding, a dull thud in my chest, as I glanced back at the crowd. Mom was still flitting between guests, her lipstick freshly applied, while Dad nursed a beer by the grill, muttering about the heat. Natalie, my sister, was nowhere in sight, probably avoiding me as usual. And Grandpa, or the man in the wheelchair, sat motionless, his hands folded like props, his face too smooth, too perfect for 90 years. I wanted to argue, to tell Roger he was being dramatic, but something in his certainty stopped me cold. I forced a smile, the kind you plaster on for a bad work meeting, and followed him toward the house. The folding chairs and paper lanterns blurred as we weaved through the crowd, my sandals sinking into the soft grass of Grandpa's sprawling lawn in upstate New York. No one noticed us slipping away, or if they did, they didn't care. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old books, a ghost of the place I remembered from childhood summers. Upstairs, I fumbled with the zipper on my overnight bag, my hands shaking as I shoved clothes inside. My mouth was dry, my mind racing. If he's wrong, I thought, this is going to be mortifying. We'll be the crazy couple who bailed on Grandpa's 90th for no reason. But then I glanced at Roger, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the room like he expected someone to burst in. If he's right, I couldn't finish the thought. It was too big, too impossible. We made it to the car parked on the quiet street, the summer evening heavy with humidity. Roger opened the passenger door for me, a oddly formal gesture that felt like something out of a spy movie. I slid into the seat, my bag clutched in my lap, and he locked the doors with a click that echoed in the silence. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and stared straight ahead. "That's not your grandfather," he said, his voice flat, like he was stating the weather. I froze, halfway through buckling my seatbelt, my breath catching in my throat. "What do you mean, it's not him?" I asked, my voice cracking.
He didn't look at me.
"I mean, that man in the wheelchair isn't your grandfather. It's someone else." I wanted to laugh again, but it came out as a choked sound, somewhere between disbelief and panic. "You think someone put on a mask? Like some Scooby-Doo villain?" I was grasping for logic, for anything to make this make sense. Roger finally turned to me, his eyes sharp. "Not a mask. His ears are different. I don't forget faces, Victoria. Never have. I can sketch a guy I saw once at a gas station in 2008, down to the shape of his jaw. That man's ears, wrong shape, wrong size. It's not him. My stomach twisted, a sick lurch like I'd just missed a step on a staircase. I pressed my hand to my face, trying to steady my breathing. "You're serious," I whispered. He nodded once. Like that settled it. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Could it be a mistake? A cousin maybe? An uncle? I remembered my uncle looking a bit like Grandpa years ago, but he wasn't at the party. Was he? I hadn't seen him. And why would anyone do this? I glanced back at the house, the warm glow of the lanterns spilling onto the lawn, the faint hum of music still drifting through the air. It looked so normal, so safe. But Roger's words had cracked that illusion, and now I couldn't unsee it. The man in the wheelchair, his distant stare, the way he hadn't acknowledged me. Not a wave. Not a smile. I told myself it was just age, that Grandpa was tired, frail. But what if Roger was right? What if that wasn't him? Sitting there in the car, the weight of the past started creeping in. Uninvited. I hadn't been back to this house in 5 years, hadn't seen most of these people in just as long. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. When I turned 18, it was a suitcase and a pat on the back. Dad's gruff, "Time to grow up, kid. Go build your life. No tears, no fanfare." But when Natalie, my sister, hit 18 2 years later, it was like she was leaving for war. Mom sobbed, begged her to stay, offered to pay for everything if she'd just stick around. I got a nod. She got a parade. I told myself I wasn't bitter, that I was fine moving on, but it stung, that sharp little ache of being the one they didn't fight for. Grandpa was different, though. He was my safe harbor. When I was a kid, he'd scoop me up, tell me stories about his old woodworking shop, his voice warm with secrets only he knew. He made me a tiny wooden boat when I was 5, showed me how to sand it smooth with hands still small enough to fumble. He smelled like cedar and peppermint tea, and for a long time, I thought I was his favorite. Even when I moved to London for work, he'd send checks, quiet, no strings attached, just a note in his shaky handwriting. "Hope this helps. Proud of you." My parents never asked what I was studying, never called unless I did first. Natalie's updates were perfunctory, holiday emails at best. But Grandpa? He was my tether to this place, this family, until the calls stopped 3 years ago. Mom said he was too sick, too tired. I believed her. I let it go. Now, sitting in the car, those excuses felt like lies. 3 years. 3 years of he's resting, or he's had a rough day. I hadn't spoken to him since that last Zoom call, when he'd laughed about squirrels stealing his tomatoes. He'd looked older but sharp, still himself. Why hadn't I pushed harder? Why hadn't I flown back sooner? The guilt mixed with the fear, a toxic cocktail that made my hands tremble. I looked at Roger, his face set like stone. "What if it's your uncle?" he said, reading my mind. "You said he looked like your grandpa when he was younger." I nodded, dazed. It was possible. But why? And where was Grandpa? The question hit me like a punch. Where was he? The toasts, the tears, the way Mom wouldn't let me get close to him. It all felt wrong now, like a stage play I'd walked into without a script. My heart was hammering so loud, I could barely think. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do?" Roger's eyes softened for the first time since we'd left the party. "I think you need to call someone." I stared at him, the weight of it sinking in. "The police?" He nodded. I pictured Mom's face, that tight smile she'd given me when we arrived, like I was a guest who'd shown up uninvited. I pictured Natalie's avoidance, Dad's indifference. I pictured Grandpa, or whoever that was, sitting in that wheelchair, silent. My thumb hovered over my phone, the screen glowing in the dark. "If we're wrong," I whispered, "this is going to ruin everything." Roger reached over, his hand steady on mine. "Victoria," he said, "you're not the one who did that." I took a breath, my chest tight, and dialed 911. The police arrived faster than I expected, their unmarked sedan pulling up to the curb just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Grandpa's lawn. Two officers, plain clothes, stepped out, their faces unreadable under the glow of the streetlights. I sat in the car, my hand still clutching my phone, watching them approach the house like they were delivering a routine package. My heart was racing, a mix of dread and hope that Roger had gotten it wrong, that this was all some ridiculous misunderstanding. The party hadn't stopped. Music still drifted from the backyard, and I could see Mom's silhouette moving among the guests, her laughter sharp and forced. I wanted to run back, to tell the officers to forget it, to apologize for dragging them out to upstate New York for what might be nothing. But Roger's hand on my arm kept me rooted. "Let them do their job," he said, his voice steady but tight, like he was holding his breath too. The officers slipped into the crowd, their presence subtle at first. No sirens, no flashing lights, just two guys in button-downs who could have been late arrivals to the barbecue. I watched from the car, my breath fogging the window, as they started talking to people. A woman with a wine glass gestured toward the house, oblivious. Dad was still by the grill, his shoulders hunched, staring at the ground like he could will it to swallow him. Natalie's husband was laughing, but it was quieter now, nervous. The man in the wheelchair, the one Roger swore wasn't Grandpa, sat unchanged. His hands folded, his eyes fixed on some distant point. The officers approached him, kneeling to speak, their voices too low to hear. Mom appeared then, her face tight, her arms crossed like she was bracing for a storm. She handed them something, a wallet, maybe an ID, and her mouth moved fast, her hands slicing the air. I couldn't hear her, but I knew that look. Defensive, cornered, the way she got when someone questioned her story. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my stomach churning. What was I doing? Calling the cops on my own family at Grandpa's 90th birthday? I pictured the headlines, the gossip that would spread through our small town, the kind of thing that ends up on local blogs or Reddit threads. I was the outsider, the daughter who'd moved to London, the one who didn't belong anymore. And now I was tearing it all apart. Roger reached for my hand, his grip firm. "You're not wrong for this," he said, reading my mind. I wanted to believe him, but the guilt was heavy, like a stone in my chest. The officers' questions seemed to shift the air. The party didn't stop, but it dimmed, like someone had turned down the volume on reality. Guests still held their drinks, still smiled, but their eyes darted now, their postures stiff. One officer spoke to Mom again, and her face changed, pale, then flushed, her lips a thin line. She shook her head, her hands gesturing wildly, then dropping to her sides. Dad stayed back, staring at the hedge like it held the answers. The man in the wheelchair finally spoke, just a few words, his head nodding slightly. The officer stood, his face still unreadable, and walked away, pulling out a radio. The other stayed, watching the crowd like a hawk. I couldn't breathe. What were they finding? Was Roger right? Was that man not Grandpa? Minutes stretched into forever, each one pressing down on me like a weight. Then one officer returned to our car, his steps measured, his expression neutral. "Can you folks stick around?" he asked, his voice calm, professional. "We'll need to talk more soon." I swallowed hard, my voice barely working. "Is it him? Is that my grandfather?" He didn't answer directly, just said, "We're confirming some things. Stay nearby." Then he was gone, back to the house, leaving me with a knot in my gut and 1,000 questions. Roger squeezed my hand. "It's not him," he whispered, not a question but a fact. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, watching the party unravel from a distance. That night, my phone rang, shattering the silence of our hotel room. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and my heart sank. I answered, bracing myself. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice raw, a mix of fury and tears. "You called the cops on your own family, Victoria, on Grandpa's birthday. You think you're better than us because you ran off to London." I tried to speak, to explain, but she barreled on. "You weren't here. You don't know what we went through. You have no idea what you've done." Her words hit like punches, each one heavier than the last. "What did you do, Mom?" I asked, my voice breaking. Where's Grandpa? Silence. Then a cold, hard edge. You don't get to ask that.
Not now.
Not after this. The line went dead, and I sat there, staring at the phone, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under me. The next morning, the police came to our hotel. 2 officers, the same ones from the night before, stood in the doorway, their faces somber. I thought I might throw up, not from fear of them, but from the hope that this was all a mistake, that Roger had misread something, that Grandpa was still alive, still himself. But the officer who spoke didn't sugarcoat it. We've had a voluntary statement, he said, his voice steady. Your family reports that Mr. Ellis passed away in March 2022. Natural causes. The body was privately buried. The words hit like a freight train. 3 years. Grandpa had been gone for 3 years, and no one told me. I'd sent birthday cards, asked for Zoom calls, wondered if I'd done something to make him pull away. And all along he was dead. I sank onto the bed, my legs numb, my fingers cold. 3 years, I whispered, more to myself than to them. The officer nodded, his eyes softening just a fraction. We're treating this as an open investigation until the coroner can confirm the circumstances of death, he said. We're also looking into the impersonation. Impersonation. The word felt surreal, like something from a bad movie. I pictured the man in the wheelchair, his smooth face, his distant eyes. Was it my uncle? Someone else?
Why?
I asked if Grandpa had suffered. They didn't know yet. I asked if the man at the party was my uncle. They nodded but didn't elaborate. We'll be in touch, they said, and left us there, the weight of the truth settling like dust. I stared at the hotel carpet, the cheap pattern blurring as tears stung my eyes. 3 years of lies. 3 years of Mom saying he was too sick to talk, of Natalie dodging my calls, of Dad's silence. They'd let me believe he was alive. Let me hope, let me carry that guilt. And for what? I thought of the house, the one they all lived in, the one Grandpa built with his own hands after his business took off. I thought of the way Mom had looked at me when we arrived, her smile tight, like I was an inconvenience. I thought of the party, the toasts, the tears, all a performance. Roger sat beside me, quiet, letting me process. They lied to me, I said, my voice hollow. He nodded. They lied to everyone. And in that moment, I knew the worst was still to come. The police left our hotel room, their words still ringing in my ears. Grandpa had been gone since March 2022. 3 years of silence I'd mistaken for distance. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the beige carpet of our upstate New York hotel, my hands cold and trembling. Roger stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the morning light, giving me space to process the impossible. 3 years. I'd sent birthday cards to a ghost, left voicemails for a man who wasn't there, carried the guilt of thinking I'd let him down by moving to London. The truth was a gut punch. My family hadn't just lied. They'd orchestrated a performance, parading a stranger in a wheelchair to keep up the illusion of Grandpa's 90th birthday. My mind raced, piecing together the why, but deep down I already knew it wasn't just about love or grief. It was something colder, something calculated. A few days later, the coroner's report came through, confirming what the family had claimed. Grandpa died in his sleep, natural causes. No signs of foul play. He'd slipped away quietly, the way he'd always lived, without fuss, without demanding attention. I sat in our rental car outside the police station, reading the email on my phone, tears blurring the screen. I wanted to feel relief that he hadn't suffered, that there was no violence or betrayal in his final moments, but the ache in my chest wouldn't let go. The coroner's confirmation closed one question but opened a dozen more. Why hadn't they told me? Why the charade? The police weren't done either. They were digging into the deception, the impersonation, the years of lies. My family had crossed lines, and the law wasn't going to let it slide. The legal fallout came swiftly, though not as harshly as I'd expected. My parents, Natalie, her husband, and my uncle, the stand-in for Grandpa, faced charges: failure to report a death, illegal access to funds, identity deception. I learned this from a curt phone call with a detective who explained it all in the clipped, professional tone you'd use to discuss a parking ticket. No one went to jail. Instead, they got probation, conditional, monitored, with the kind of stern warnings that linger like a bad aftertaste. My uncle cooperated fully, admitting he'd been the one in the wheelchair, wearing glasses and a bit of makeup to pass as grandpa. He claimed it was to protect the family, to keep things stable. I didn't buy it, and neither did the judge, but his cooperation earned him leniency. I sat through the updates, numb, wondering how you protect a family by burying the truth. Then came the call that changed everything. It wasn't from the police or my family, but from Grandpa's lawyer, a man named Harold with a voice like warm coffee. "Victoria," he said, "I've been trying to reach you for some time." I nearly hung up, thinking it was another scam, another layer of this nightmare. But he kept talking, calm and deliberate. "Your grandfather left everything to you. The house, the business assets, the trust. All of it." I froze, my phone pressed to my ear, staring at the cracked grout in the hotel bathroom tile. "Everything," I whispered. He confirmed it, explaining that Grandpa had made the decision years ago, long before he passed, and had told my family as much. The house in upstate New York, the savings, the small woodworking business he'd built from nothing, it was all mine. Suddenly, the pieces clicked. The lies, the fake birthday party, the man in the wheelchair, it wasn't just about keeping up appearances. They'd been living in Grandpa's house, spending his money, knowing it was supposed to be mine. They'd kept me in the dark to keep it all. I sat down hard on the bathroom floor, the weight of it crushing. I wasn't rich, Grandpa's estate wasn't some billionaire fortune, but it was enough. Enough for a comfortable life, enough for them to fight to keep it, enough to explain 3 years of deception. I thought of Mom's tight smile when we arrived, Natalie's avoidance, the way Dad barely looked at me. They'd known. They'd all known. And instead of telling me, they'd built a lie so elaborate it required a stand-in grandpa to pull it off. I wanted to scream, to call them and demand answers, but what was the point? They'd already shown who they were. The story didn't stay quiet. A few days after the police visit, it started spreading online, like wildfire on dry grass. Someone, probably a guest at the party, had recorded the birthday toast, Mom's tearful speech about Grandpa's 90 years of wisdom, and posted it to a local gossip blog. From there, it hit Reddit, then X, with headlines like, "Family fakes Grandpa's 90th birthday with imposter." The video was grainy, shaky, but it captured the moment perfectly. Mom wiping her eyes, the man in the wheelchair staring blankly, the crowd clapping like it was all real. The internet did what it does best. It laughed, then it judged. Comments poured in, some calling my family monsters, others saying I was the villain for calling the cops. "Ungrateful daughter ruins family legacy." One post read. "She's just after the money," another claimed. I stopped reading after the first dozen. The truth was messy enough, without strangers' hot takes. Backlash hit my family hard. Neighbors who'd once waved at them in the grocery store now whispered behind their backs. The local paper ran a story, tactful but damning, and my parents' social media went silent. Natalie unfollowed me. Not that we'd been close anyway. I didn't gloat. I didn't have the energy. The courts handled the final blow, ordering my family to vacate Grandpa's house. They moved out quietly, no apologies, no goodbyes. Mom left a note on the kitchen counter. "You always were good at taking what you didn't earn." I read it once, then burned it in the sink, watching the edges curl and blacken. It felt like the only thing I could control. I walked through the house after they left, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. It was still Grandpa's place, the cedar smell, the creaky stairs, the worn armchair where he'd told me stories as a kid. But it was mine now, legally, undeniably. I didn't feel triumphant, just hollow. I'd uncovered the truth, but at what cost? My family was gone. Not just from the house, but from my life. I wondered if I'd pushed too far, if there'd been another way. But then I remembered Grandpa's checks, his quiet notes. The way he'd believed in me when no one else did. He'd wanted this for me. And maybe, just maybe, he'd known they'd try to take it. I sat in Grandpa's old armchair, the one by the window in his upstate New York house, a glass of red wine in my hand, and my feet propped on the coffee table. The house was quiet now, just the hum of crickets outside and the faint scent of wood polish lingering in the air. It was my first night here alone, after the courts had cleared my family out. After the truth about Grandpa's death 3 years ago had torn everything apart. I'd always felt like an outsider in this family, pushed out at 18 while my sister was begged to stay, but sitting here, in the space Grandpa built, I didn't feel like a stranger anymore. It was bittersweet, this inheritance, this house, his legacy. I mourned him, the man who'd sent me checks and quiet notes of pride, but I also mourned the family I'd lost for good. Had I gone too far, calling the cops, exposing their lies? Or had I not gone far enough, letting them walk away with just probation? I don't know. What I do know is this house feels like home now. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Share your thoughts below, hit subscribe, and tap the bell for more stories like this.